What happens is after the Ferguson riot and after the Floyd riot, policemen, in fear of their jobs many times and political coverage, pull back from their jobs, resulting in an increased level of homicide.
Listen, I got to stop you there because, hold on.
You can look at the Washington Post.
Ryan, we got to stop you there because you're literally making a connection out of your own conjecture.
No,
you cannot
it's a real thing.
That.
Look up the Ferguson effect. Look up the Floyd effect.
There continues to be a focus on Kamala Harris's struggle in the Black community, specifically for Black men, for the vote of Black men. You remember Barack Obama last week lectured Black men. He said the brothers aren't coming out to vote for Kamala the way they did for me, trying to shame them, lecture them. You know, as a white conservative man for the last 15 years of my life, I'm used to Barack Obama wagging his finger at me and shaming me because he's so disappointed in my sexism or my racism or my conservatism. But I'm guessing for most Black men in this country, they were a little stunned by that approach. Well, the contrast between Donald Trump's improvement for a Republican with the Black male vote and Kamala Harris's struggles became a subject of conversation on a CNN panel last night. Conservative commentator Ryan Girdusky, he squared off against everybody else on the panel. And watch what happened when he raised the issue of the Ferguson effect. The Ferguson effect, you know, the Ferguson effect is when after the riots in Ferguson, there were major changes in law enforcement strategies and policies, most specifically about having police officers reduce their engagement in certain communities in their usual law and order crime fighting tactics. And the end result was more Black people in those communities ended up being the victims of crime, oftentimes violent crime. In other words, the Ferguson effect was when you try to have the police disengage with Black communities, it actually harms Black people living in those communities. You've heard of this. I know you have. But just watch what happens because nobody on the CNN panel had heard of it.
Just yesterday, Ryan, about how in the context of riots, he was saying, let's just bring the military into it to deal with American citizens. I mean, that happened yesterday.
Right, but the post-George Floyd riots resulted in an excess of over 15,000 Black male deaths in this country. How?
Yeah.
The surge of violent crime, it was like Ferguson, the Ferguson effect and the Floyd effect.
Respectfully, you got to explain to me how George Floyd's death.
Yeah.
Because I need causation here.
Yes,
you really are.
What happens is after the Ferguson riot and after the Floyd riot, policemen, in fear of their jobs many times and political coverage, pull back from their jobs, resulting in an increased level of homicide.
Listen, I got to stop you there because, hold on.
You can look at the Washington Post.
Ryan, we got to stop you there because you're literally making a connection out of your own conjecture.
No,
you cannot.
It's a real thing. Look up the Ferguson effect. Look up the Floyd effect. It is a real term.
You cannot.
It's a real term. I didn't make this up.
Invent a connection between two things just because you want that connection to be there.
It's a little like a name. It's a real thing. You can look it up.
It could be a right thing, but it doesn't mean it's
all right. So let me jump in here. There's more to this, but I just want to give you a quick commentary because you see what's happening here. They're accusing him of lying, is what's happening. And that woman, she's the anchor here. So she's a CNN employee and she's trying to stop him and cut off. You can't just lie. You can't just make things up because you want them to be true. And again, what he's saying is that the net result of having law enforcement disengage in Black communities post-Ferguson and post-George Floyd ended up with the deaths and victimization of 15,000 African Americans in this country. The number's probably bigger, actually. And he says this is a thing. It's a phenomenon. It's an actual thing called the Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect. And no one else at the table knew about it. And in fact, forget about not knowing about it. They're claiming that Ryan Girdusky is lying, that he's misrepresented. And I'm sure they're thinking to themselves, what a racist lie this is. Well, watch as the conversation continues to progress. And well, we'll give you the punchline in a minute.
Let's move on because
I'll send you a reading list after the show.
Before we move on,
Hold on. I just want everyone to settle down because people cannot hear at home when everybody's talking at once. Okay, go ahead.
No, I just think there has to be a level of intellectual honesty. And one of the things we can talk about here when we talk about Donald Trump is he's actually somebody who never spoke out about George Floyd's death. And for me, it's kind of personal because as a Black man, when you have someone with a knee on their neck for 9 minutes and some change, and you're actually calling out for your mother while you're being suffocated on national TV, and you are a parent and a son and a brother, that goes a long way. The kind of disingenuity or dishonesty for me.
Okay, so first of all, that was a blatant appeal to emotion, which is fine. I guess you got to do that sometimes, but that's not based on fact. That's just emotion. He said, this is important to me because I'm a black man and I'm a father. And I'm not, okay, fine. But we're talking about facts and data here. Also, I think that the word he's looking for is disingenuousness instead of disingenuity. But, you know, we all end up getting tongue-tied sometimes, right? Of course, the difference is I don't make the kind of money that he does to go there and sit on a failing network like CNN. So you'd think he'd have his act together a little bit more. That said, I don't want to, you know, kick him always down. Let's continue.
Is you cannot say that what happened during that time period is to blame for the deaths of other black men due to violence or what have you.
100% happened.
But that literally, and my point to you is that makes absolutely no sense. And I would argue to you as somebody that I'm not coming from a perspective where I want fewer police. I don't. I want police actually to be paid more. I just want better police, more qualified police. I want there to be a database where police, if they commit bad acts, they can't just go from one department to another. That's criminal justice reform.
Okay.
But George Floyd didn't cause 15,000.
And here, before you jump in, I mean, we should know that we're talking about things that happened when Donald Trump was president.
Right.
He was the president.
But
so how is he not responsible for it?
Well, the president doesn't control local police departments.
Well, okay, but you're trying to blame crime on Joe Biden.
No, I
but
didn't
you don't blame. Okay,
blame
Republicans have blamed
Joe Biden.
crime on Joe Biden, but you cannot. But you're saying that people who died when Donald Trump was president, that's not his fault.
I don't
agree with either blame being assigned to either president. I think
But I
presidents
didn't blame Joe
don't
Biden.
have a magic wand and they don't control crime from the White House.
Right.
But if you're going to say that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are responsible for a rise in crime,
I didn't say that, though.
don't you have to?
He didn't say that. And let me just fill you in here because the conversation began before this clip started. On the Breakfast Club podcast with Charlemagne the God, Kamala Harris was asked about police violence against African Americans, and she bragged about the fact that she had authored a bill in the Senate called the George Floyd criminal justice reform bill or something like that. And she started championing the idea that we need to do all of these reforms in local law enforcement. That's why this issue is even being discussed. All right. So they're being completely disingenuous to say, oh, well, you're blaming Joe Biden. It's like, no, I'm not blaming Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris is bragging about doing these things. And the net result of those things is that more black people died because the police were told to disengage from these communities. It's called the Ferguson effect. It's a real thing. And you heard him say, I'll send you the literature. It's in the Washington Post. It's in the New York Times. I'll send you everything so you can educate yourself. So you know, I swear I'm not making it up. Ryan Girdusky's got to act like he's, you know, in some sort of, you know, Wonkaville or something. It is like, this is what is going on here? This is fantasy land. All right. So we're going to let this finish up here and then we'll get to the punchline.
All I will say is, like, we're talking about what the future is for Black Americans. And what I will say is that Kamala Harris supports the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which, again, I have no idea what you're talking about in terms of connection. I will read it, and then I will fact check the sources that actually wrote the thing. But
okay, so she says she will read it and she will fact check the source, which is good. And I appreciate her having a somewhat open mind, although you could tell from her tone that she was being a little condescending. Well, here's the good news. Later that evening, this was last night, and early this morning, Ryan Girdusky actually made good on that and did so on the X platform and sent out links, not just to the Washington Post article and the op-eds that have been written in major left-wing newspapers and publications about the boomerang effect of these bills and these laws and these actions that have defunded the police or have the police re-engage and disengage in how they do their typical law enforcement tactics in these cities, resulting in this net effect. But he also sent a link. She just said that she'll fact check the sources. Well, she should probably carefully fact check this source because it's CNN. And CNN has this article from 2015. FBI chief tries to deal with the Ferguson effect. Yeah, that's right. The two sources here actually are CNN and James Comey, the then FBI director. A year after unrest in Ferguson, Missouri brought increased scrutiny of police, FBI Director James Comey has thrown his weight behind the idea that restraint by cops in the wake of criticism is at least partly to blame for a surge in violent crime in some cities. The tensions over policing and crime came when, for the first time in a generation, unusual political forces have aligned and the nation appears on the verge of relaxing tough criminal sentencing laws. Liberals and conservatives now seem to agree that 1980s era anti-drug laws boosted U.S. prison populations too much, with the burden falling disproportionately on minority communities. Some law enforcement officials, including Comey, are raising concerns that a spike in crime, or at least the perception that the recent era of historically low crime rates is at risk and could hurt criminal justice reform's efforts. It's called the Ferguson effect. CNN wrote about it. You know, one sad circumstance of working and living in the Washington, D.C. area and being in the media, as I have done now for, well, in D.C., going on 13 years, but I'm doing this career now for over 15 years. Or just 15 years, I should say. One of the sad results of being in this profession, and I'll share it with you and be completely honest with you, is when you do these television shows and you meet these people who you've seen on television who are paid to lend their expertise and intelligence as analysts to important issues that are affecting all Americans. When you finally meet them in the green rooms at these cable news or broadcast news networks, or when you engage with them by sitting at a panel like Ryan did here, you quickly realize how uninformed these people are. Just basic news smarts. All of you watching right now actually probably have a better handle on news and events and what actually has happened in this country than the majority of people who sit on these panels who are paid to give their expert, intelligent analysis to things going on. Every single one of the people at that table had never heard of the Ferguson effect, and they had no idea that this thing even existed. And the fact that it was on CNN and the source material that one of the links that Ryan Girdusky put out was from CNN.com is a delicious irony. I mean, maybe the people who are paid to go on CNN to talk about topical issues and the news and politics and policy, maybe those CNN employees should spend a little bit more time watching and reading CNN. Although, I'll be honest with you, usually it doesn't make you that much better informed. Maybe they should check out Town Hall, actually. A little bit more happened on this panel, and I want you to see it. Here we go.
So what is Donald Trump's plan for Black America, Ryan?
Well, he hasn't endorsed another platinum plan like he did last time, but he certainly has spoken of Black voters a number of times, and his support with Black voters is at the largest of any Republican since Richard Nixon in 1960. I think that it's not so much Trump's campaign this time has not been so much racialized, where he speaks only to Black voters and only to Hispanic voters, whatever. He's speaking to the youth demographic a lot. Bakari said he only does Fox, but he's on every podcast known to man at this point. Every bro podcast, every comedy podcast. He was on with Schultz a couple days ago. It was a huge audience. So he does speak to young men, period. It's not so racialized, which I think is very, very important, because younger Black voters, if you look at polls, are not as connected to the Black church. They are not connected to institutionalized things within Black America as older Black voters are, which is, I think, part of the generational divide.
I mean, that's a fair point. I mean, Trump is doing it a different way. Do you think it's worth?
All right. It's an interesting question, though. What is Donald Trump's policy when it comes to Black men or Black voters? Which, again, I think it's a great answer, which is, we don't really have policies specifically geared toward people based on the color of their skin. Frankly, that would be racist. Which brings us to, well, Kamala Harris's just announced policies specifically for Black men. Yeah, she recognizes that she's not really gaining the number of Black male votes that she needs. So she put out what she's calling the Kamala Harris Opportunity Agenda for Black Men. Let's go through it quickly, shall we? Number one, 1 million loans that are fully forgivable up to $20,000 for Black entrepreneurs and others to start a business. Just so you know, a fully forgivable loan is free money. Why do they even call it a loan? It's a fully forgivable loan. In other words, here, we're going to give you this loan of $20,000. It's a loan. Really? Well, when do I have to pay it back? Oh, you don't have to pay it back. What do you mean I don't have to pay it back? It's a loan. Yeah, but it's a forgivable loan, and we forgive you. So you're giving me free money. That's correct. So it's not a loan. Oh, no. It's a loan. Only Democrats would come up with something like this. All right, next, support education, training, and mentorship programs lead to good-paying jobs for Black men, including pathways to become teachers. Can I ask you something? How many decades have we heard Democrats say something like this? Oh, we're going to do new job training so that Black people can get good jobs. When has it ever worked? Because clearly they still have to do it. They still have to create these programs. I got an idea. How about you fix the schools that you run exclusively, especially in predominantly Black neighborhoods, so that they do their job of educating everyone in this country, so you don't have to have a special jobs program for people based on the color of their skin. They just get a good quality education that then translates into a good job. Oh, no. We couldn't possibly do that. The teachers union controls us, don't you know? All right, number 3, protect cryptocurrency investments so Black men who make them know their money is safe. What? So if you invest in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency and you're white, well, good luck. It's a risk and you never know what might happen. But if you're Black, we'll make sure we insure it and protect it for you. That seems racist, doesn't it? Oh, but there's more. Launched a national health initiative focused on the illness that disproportionately impact Black men. I thought they did that under the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, but again, another failed program that we now have to throw more money to do what it was supposed to do the first time they promised us it would do it. And then the last one, it's really my favorite. Legalize recreational marijuana and create opportunities for Black Americans to succeed in the new industry. In other words, we're going to give you legalized pot and we're going to set you up as drug dealers. That's how they're going to appeal to Black men. I've got a lot to say about that, but since I'm a white man, if I attempt to say something about it, I'll be called, racist. So let's have this guy comment on it.
I was saying, you got to forgive a lot of things about Trump to vote for him. And you said, oh, yeah? How would it go over if he said, I'm going to give you free weed, Black guys, go enjoy yourselves? That's what Harris's plan is. Yeah. Why isn't that working for you?
Well, the Harris plan doesn't work for me because basically if Black men were a important thing to Kamala Harris, she would not be putting out this little 5-point proposal 3 weeks out of an election. She would not be going out of her way to talk to Black men 3 weeks before the election, right? And like I said, if Donald Trump had put out a proposal that said, hey, Black men, I want your vote. I'm going to legalize marijuana. Do you know what the Kamala Harris campaign would say about that? It's completely ridiculous. It's disrespectful to Black men. And honestly, I don't think that they knew that they were going to get this blowback from the Obama comments where he basically shamed and denigrated Black men for not being excited enough to go vote for Kamala Harris. So what Black men are basically saying, and look, I'm not going to say that there's going to be this big groundswell of Black support for Donald Trump. I think it's going to be more than 2020. But what Black men are saying is you can't bully us, denigrate us, shame us into supporting this woman who may not align with what we agree with. And by the way, illegal immigration is also an issue for Black Americans and all Americans. And Black men know that the Biden-Harris administration, over 90 executive orders day one, loosened Trump's restrictions on that border, which allowed 10 million illegal immigrants who fled across this country. They're not going to penthouses in New York. They're going to working class Black communities, and Black men see this.
All right, that's really well said, and good for you, sir, in saying it. And yeah, that's the bottom line here. If you're a Black man in this country and you're married and you've got some kids, let's say you're 29, 30 years old and you're struggling to get by and you're doing the right thing and you got a job and you're working hard, you're trying to be a good father, you're trying to be a good husband, you're trying to keep the roof over your head, you're trying to keep the bills paid, you're maybe working a second job just like your dad did to make sure that everybody's fed and everybody's safe. And Kamala Harris wants your vote and she's running for president, and her big idea is that she's going to legalize pot. How are you supposed to take that? How are you supposed to react to that? Not to mention the fact that Kamala Harris, in the early part of her career, made a name for herself by jailing as many young Black men with a pocket full of pot that she could because she wanted votes. All right. You know what? Final word on the black vote here. I'm told by pop culture and the news media that the only place to really find out what's going on with people in the black community, especially men, is to go to a barbershop. So let's go to a barbershop in Michigan. And this is CBS News, by the way. So you know that they were hoping to get an answer that is friendly to Democrats and Kamala Harris. And, well, they didn't.
I think it's touch and go right now. I see shades of the Hillary Clinton campaign with the arrogance of a Democratic Party out of touch with the electorate.
Ooh, that's going to leave a mark. Every time somebody compares Kamala Harris to Hillary Clinton, it's not good. And the word arrogance, I think, does permeate everywhere. The only thing that I would say is where he says the arrogance of the Democratic Party. That's true, 100%. But it's personified by the arrogance of Kamala Harris. There's a lot of that to go around. They're in trouble. They're desperate. And, well, we're here for it.